Thank you, Congressman Pittenger. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. This has been a remarkable event so far with so many interesting topics and so many good speakers. It's an honor to be here with all of you and to speak with these gentlemen. I really respect both of these men so much in the anti-money laundering and counterterrorism field that it's a wonderful opportunity. I think one of the things, this is a very difficult topic because it's broad, like a lot of the topics we were discussing. So I think I'm going to present a little bit, and then my colleagues will present. If you wanted to continue the dialogue afterwards, just grab any of us. We're happy to have the conversation further in more detail or answer any questions. When you look at terrorist financing and organized crime and cyber crime, they're all crime. It's how we look at it fundamentally and ideology-wise. It's an unlawful activity. And when you get into the difference between terrorist activity and organized crime and cybercrime, you have to really get into somebody's mindset and their feelings on why they're doing it if you wanted to separate them out. Then that gets into a very, very serious and almost unanswerable legal question. Unlawful activity is really a very broad-based thing that gets into ethics and then gets into morals, because terrorists normally are acting with an ideology, and the mindset is to persuade or to take over something for different type of reasons beyond profit. Organized crime is working just on profit. But over the last 20 years, they've been working together simultaneously, knowing that they could either overthrow governments, take over areas of populations, or change an ideology. Then if you look at ISIS, which has become, or at one point was the largest oil producer in the area, and that's a quote-unquote terrorist organization. So was it a criminal organization? Was it an organized crime? Or was it terrorist? Again, those are fine lines. Now, crime is a philosophical issue, and it's not agreed to. What is a crime in the United States and Canada versus Saudi Arabia versus Japan versus Russia versus China? It's very, very different. So it really comes down to an ideology of where you live. Moral and ethics, of course, are more of an individual and a godly approach and have to come into the equation. But terrorist groups use violence and intimidation against government and civilians in order to get something done. Quite frankly, that sounds a lot like organized crime around the world. You know, terrorizing civilians, trying to get what they want. They want money. Others want an ideology, but they want money to get the ideology. So it really, really comes together. So I think one of the things that we need to do in the counterterrorism and organized crime, anti-money laundering, counterterrorism movement and profession is kind of merge these things together now. Why somebody is doing an illicit activity is not as the driving point anymore. It is what are they doing and how do you identify the activity? Then later on, prosecutors in the legal world can actually debate why they were doing it and does it fall into what category. I think one of the most important things is to look at how we look at the information related to the parties, related to the actors, and what they're doing. And the reason why I say that, in the 1970s, as a matter of fact, 1970, they came up with the Organized Crime Act in the United States, which was classifying organized criminals and who they were and identifying them. Then after 9/11 in the United States with the Patriot Act, it became much more of a terrorist activity. So it focuses people differently. You know, and we had a big conversation on this last night, whether it's moral or ethical, whether it's criminal or not. It's illegal, it's not ethical, and it's immoral. Those three things go across the board when it comes to illicit activity. So I don't look so much at who's doing it, it's what they're doing. We could figure out who later. So when you're looking at activities, what we look at the most in the field of counterterrorism and anti-money laundering is this person or business acting the way they said they were supposed to? And that's really important because we now have a lot of information available. So if somebody says they're operating an oil company in Canada, well, we know how a typical oil company in Canada would work. If it starts to act differently, then that's the red flag. So it's not so much the transaction value, because when I started in this business, it was all about the transaction monitoring, looking at behavioral patterns of the transaction itself, which generates, when you use standard rule modeling, generates so much noise. so much noise that people think they're busy and they're just working on these STRs and possible STR filings, possible SAR filings, and it's really taking away from looking at why is this person doing this, and is it logical or illogical? Then you get into, is it legal or is it illegal, and then you get into ethic and immorally. But at the end of the day, this person or this entity or this actor is not acting as they said they would, or they're not acting like their peers. So what we need to do, in my opinion, is spend much more time on KYC, what we call KYC, know your customer, KYB, know your business. And we now have a lot more tools available, which my colleagues are going to speak a little bit about when it comes to artificial intelligence. But the key factor that I want to drive home is if we continually have what I call silo data lakes. We have criminal organizations in this silo and information about them. We have another silo of information or a data lake of information related to terrorists. We have another silo created on cybercrime and another cyber on another crime and another data lake on another crime. You're never going to be able to look at it holistically across the board. So I've been saying this for years, and it sounds repetitive, but the information and how we look at information, which is really called a data lake. A data lake, if it's cleansed right and you have good data hygiene, and you're able to actually put all of this type of illicit activity into one data lake, we now have tools and the capabilities to go into that data lake and say, this person should not be in any way whatsoever doing business with this person because they're totally unrelated, they're in different businesses, and they're not related to each other in any way, what normal or rational way whatsoever. So that's not so much a transaction, that's who the counterparty is. And if we start looking at that and we start creating these data lakes which don't deal with law, they deal with illicit activity, immoral activity, unethical activity, you're going to start to get better results. I think as I conclude, just to allow my colleagues to have a little bit of additional time, what we need to do is stop defining what it is so much and actually start acting on the information that we have. We have these debates, and I go to a lot of different conferences, trade-based finance, terrorist activity, anti-money laundering, cyber. It's all illegal activity. It's all meant to do harm to society. And this is a zero-sum game. You're taking money out of society and putting it into bad actors' hands. So it's kind of like for every dollar that you remove and take out of circulation, it actually hurts the society that they're dealing with. So what we need to do is start looking at terrorist financing, cyber, criminal activity, all related the same as illicit activity, merge it together and start looking at how do we identify and share information with each other across, not only across each state, across each border, and come up with a unified approach. And one of the ways to do that, and that's a very nice tie-in to my colleague, is by having government and private partnerships to be able to share information in a rational way. You know, everybody's always like, well, you can't share this, you can't share that, or you could share everything. There has to be some sort of rational way for the public and private to work together to be able to share information without taking away privacy or human beings' rights. There's a balance there. So I think we always get into this dialogue, all or nothing. And that's what separates so many good relationships from happening, both cross-border and within our own countries. There has to be some reasonable approaches to private-public partnerships that share information about bad actors and illicit activity that protect society overall. And the definition of terrorist organizations needs to be reevaluated because the terrorist organization list is now so big, it's really hard to determine and look for. If you look at a sanctions list, it used to be purely actors, bad actors, and now it's almost very debatable. It could be considered almost political. So we need to start looking at this a little bit differently. But as AI comes in, it's going to be easier to determine activities of individuals that don't make sense. We just need to have good, clean data lakes, and we have to have public-private partnerships in order to share that information properly. On that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague.